You do this job long enough and you think you've seen every kind of gatekeeping an HOA can pull. They fine old ladies for hanging wind chimes. They measure grass with rulers like it's sacred scripture. I thought I had the rhythm figured out. I really did. But nothing prepared me for the sting of voltage running through my ribs while a neighbor's life was flickering out less than 50 yards away. That sound is still trapped under my skin. A crackle like a nest of hornets waking up at once. And the silence that followed was worse, because silence is where you hear someone dying. It started like any other call. Just past 8 p.m., summer dusk settling heavy over the cul-de-sac. I was off shift, a physician, walking back from my neighbor's place after checking on her husband who'd had a rough patch with his diabetes. I carried my stethoscope still looped around my neck because I knew Evelyn Hart next door wasn't doing well either. Heart trouble. The kind where you keep the AED charged, just in case. That night, her husband burst out onto the porch, pale, waving his arms. She's not breathing. Please, help. His voice cracked in the middle like a man snapping in half. I ran, no hesitation. My training already clicking into place like a metronome. Assess airway. Start compressions. Call 911. But before I even got through the gate, before I could lay hands on Evelyn, the HOA's new security detail appeared. Not cops, not even EMTs. Just private guards in forest green uniforms that looked like Halloween costumes stitched together in bulk. The tallest one planted himself in front of the gate keypad. Name patch, Mercer. His palm rested casually on the yellow taser strapped to his belt. I raised both hands, steady, stethoscope glinting under the streetlight. I'm her doctor. She's in cardiac arrest. Let me through. He didn't blink. Didn't even look toward the porch where Paul Hart was still shouting his wife's name. His eyes stayed on me like I was the problem, not the fact that Evelyn's pulse was collapsing by the second. Access code? He asked. Flat, mechanical. I showed him my state medical ID so close he could see the hologram. Emergency situation. Federal Good Samaritan protection. Move aside. But he didn't. Behind me, I could hear the wail of an ambulance in the distance. Too far, too slow. Seconds were chalk dust blowing away in the wind. I stepped forward, voice hardening. You are obstructing an emergency responder. That's a felony. Move! That's when his hand shifted from resting on the taser to gripping it, and then the world cracked open. White-hot pain lit my chest like lightning had kissed me. My knees buckled. I went down hard onto the perfect ornamental grass the HOA bragged about in every newsletter. Electricity steals your body before your brain catches up. I couldn't even shout. My jaw locked. My lungs stalled. I was a silent shadow of myself. Crumpled in the dirt while a woman's life bled away in the house behind that gate. I caught glimpses through the blur, Paul hammering the iron bars with his fists, screaming Evelyn's name. The guard's boots, planted firm like he was proud of what he'd done. My own hands twitching against the gravel, powerless. By the time my colleagues in the ambulance arrived, I was still trying to get my breath back. Evelyn never got hers. Later, the coroner would put it cold and clean on the paperwork. Time of death, 8:12 p.m. We had arrived at the gate at 8:03. 9 minutes stolen by a taser and a policy manual. 9 minutes that might have been the difference between Evelyn holding Paul's hand in a hospital bed or Paul kneeling alone beside her body. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with ice pressed against the burn marks on my ribs, trying to write an incident report with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Words like electric shock, denied access, fatality due to obstruction felt too small for what had happened. But the tremor in my handwriting told the truth my words couldn't hold. A gate, a taser, and a set of HOA rules had killed a woman who still had a fighting chance. Grief has a smell. It's not roses or lilies or candle wax. It's stale coffee in a mug left half full. It's the sharp bite of disinfectant because someone scrubbed the counters until their knuckles bled just to keep from screaming. That's what hit me when I walked into Paul Hart's house 2 days later. He answered the door like a man opening a vault that held the last warmth in his life. His eyes were hollow, ringed in red but steady. And before I could even offer my condolences, the words tore out of him like a wound splitting open. Where were you? I told him the only truth I had. At the gate. Right there. We stood in that hallway, the air humming like a live wire. I told him exactly what happened. I didn't soften it, didn't dress it up. When I said taser, he didn't flinch. But when I said gate, his shoulders caved as if the word itself was heavier than grief. I had that key fob for 15 years, he muttered, voice hollow. And the one night it mattered, it might as well have been a stone in my pocket. On the kitchen table sat the still life of a life interrupted. Evelyn's reading glasses folded on a cookbook. A crossword puzzle abandoned mid-clue, a lipstick-marked teacup. Her absence was everywhere, and nowhere at once. A lawyer arrived soon after. Her name was Ava Kim. Work boots, crisp slacks, hair tied back. She looked like someone who could read a deposition in the morning and build a fence by afternoon. She didn't waste words. She laid down a stack of papers on Paul's table. Open records requests, HOA newsletters, training manuals. I flipped through them with trembling fingers. Phrases jumped out like sirens, zero-tolerance perimeters. No exceptions. Non-lethal deterrence authorized. A policy manual from a private security firm called Aegis Sentinel. And there it was in black and white, page 12. Subsection C. In any situation involving unverified entry attempts, on-duty guards are authorized to apply non-lethal deterrence when verbal escalation fails. A sentence that dressed itself like safety, but carried the weight of a bullet. Ava tapped the page. Everyone will want Mercer's head on a platter. And he'll answer for his part. But if we stop there, the machine that trained him keeps humming. This was by design, not accident. Paul's spine straightened as she spoke, as though someone had run steel down the center of his back. His voice, low but steady, broke the silence. I don't want to check. I want this never to happen again, and I want the people who voted yes to this to feel what it cost. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled to put on their stage play of sympathy. They booked the clubhouse with its bad coffee and flickering fluorescent lights. They practiced their sorry faces in mirrors. They thought they could ride it out, but truth has a way of finding cracks. One morning, Ava found an unmarked manila envelope slid under her office door. Inside was the complete security protocol, signed, dated, stamped, a flowchart littered with colored arrows. No code provided equaled potential hostile actor. Under deterrence options, in bold all caps, one word, taser, and at the bottom, a signature, P. Drake. The HOA president's mark, written like a flourish to impress a notary. The next day, flyers appeared quietly on every mailbox up and down Maple Ridge. No bold colors, no angry slogans, just plain white paper with black letters, Justice for Evelyn. Reform the board, protect the next life. Paul stood outside the very gate that had trapped his wife, holding a hand-painted sign. His face looked like stone, but his eyes burned with something sharper than grief. And behind him, neighbors began to gather. The HOA thought they could smother this under paperwork and polite statements. They thought if they spoke the right legal phrases, unfortunate incident, isolated error, policy under review, the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when the whole sky is charged. They split open. By the end of the week, the doorbell camera footage had surfaced. Someone across the street had caught everything. The ambulance lights pulsing against the iron gate. Mercer squaring his shoulders like he was guarding Fort Knox. The crackle of the taser and my body hitting the manicured grass. No edits, no commentary. Just raw footage uploaded to a community forum where outrage spreads faster than fire. 10,000 views in a day. Local reporters outside the HOA office by morning. Words like gross negligence and wrongful death dripping from every headline. The sheriff's department opened an investigation. Mercer was placed on leave, but it didn't stop there. The county prosecutor announced obstruction of an emergency responder. Federal investigators joined, because when you tase a physician during a 911 call, it stops being a neighborhood spat and starts being a civil rights violation. Paul didn't stop either. With Ava at his side, he filed suit, $5 million in damages against the HOA, Aegis Sentinel, and every board member who signed off on that manual. Not for money, for accountability. The complaint spelled it out. Evelyn Hart's death was not an accident. It was the predictable result of a system designed to value control over human life. I sat in the courtroom weeks later, ribs still sore, listening as Ava laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The forged sense of authority given to guards with minimal training. The flowcharts that turned neighbors into hostile actors. The emails where board members joked about keeping the riffraff out. Each word was another nail in the coffin of the HOA's defense. Paul didn't weep during testimony. He didn't shout. He just held Evelyn's glasses in his palm like a relic and spoke quietly into the microphone. She trusted this community to protect her. Instead, it caged her. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. The verdict is still winding its way through the courts, but the damage to the HOA was immediate. Resignations, federal charges. Neighbors who once whispered in favor of security, now taping paper hearts to Paul's fence. The gates that once blinked shut like fortress walls now hang open, their motors disabled, as if the whole neighborhood understood too late that steel bars don't make you safe. And me? I still hear the sound, that insect hum of electricity, the sharp crack of my own body folding. It doesn't fade with time, it waits. But alongside it now is something else. The sight of Paul standing beneath that gate with his sign, his grief sharpened into purpose. Sometimes the smallest acts become the loudest revolutions. A man with a hand-painted sign, a lawyer with a stack of papers. A story told in the right light. Evelyn Hart's life was cut short by 9 stolen minutes. But her death lit a fire that burned through the lies, the gatekeeping, the arrogance. And in its ashes, a neighborhood was forced to reckon with the cost of forgetting that people always come before policy.